Welcome. So in this video, I will tell you why I ordered the Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra and what pain points and problems that I feel this machine will help me solve. So my name is Sam and I do tech reviews and tutorials to help you navigate this digital world we live in. So one of the major problems I'm trying to solve is I have a ton of stuff and wires everywhere. So as you can see here before filming, I usually clean up my desk so it looks neat, but for this video, just so you can get a feel for what basically annoys me, I just left it the way it was. And as you can see, there are wires everywhere. The reason for that is that I don't have a dedicated, what I will call a lab space, where I can play with different computers as I review them, or do repair work for friends and family, or just tinkering. So all of my computers that I use for daily drivers live basically right here. I have two Mac Minis, and with the M1 being traded for the Studio, and an older i7 Mini that I use to test betas and that sort of thing. So I also have a big, loud Windows machine. I work as a software developer specializing in Windows desktop applications. So that machine is a necessity, and especially since I use it for my 9-to-5 job. So my solution was to use a bunch of display switches to allow me to use all of my machines from one set of monitors. And as you can imagine, the wiring situation is crazy. So that is essentially my biggest problem. And I have the M1 Max MacBook over here, and that just takes up too much space. I love the machine, but in order for me to use it, I have to dock it. Of course, that introduces a ton of more wires, plus it takes up valuable desk space. Plus, never my intention to use the MacBook as a desktop replacement, but to use it to take with me for travel. But can't argue that until the Studio came out, it has been the best video editing platform I have ever used. So it almost forced my hand to find a way to dock it. Now, I've been personally using Wintel since the days of Windows 3.1. And I'm really tired of it. I have been moving to Mac since I first built a Hackintosh several years ago, and I found macOS to be more intuitive, more user-friendly, and my workflow has been much faster than when using Windows, so it saves me a bunch of time. And I've been looking for a reason to switch to a mostly Mac workflow, and this seems to be finally it. And after about, the past 30 years, there's been really no innovation from Intel. So the current x86 platform is loud, hot, no real improvements anymore, and with the same tired architecture. They are probably tied to their partners such as Nvidia and board manufacturers, so I get it that it's not easy to just flip the switch and change direction, especially with AMD behind them. But the high-end Windows desktops, they pretty much cater to gamers, which is a tiny fraction of the market. I don't understand why they couldn't do both like Apple does. Just come up with a fast, efficient, and powerful platform that doesn't need the current framework for consumers and keep up with the x86 for the gamers. There has been no innovation in the prosumer market in over a decade. So just look at the Dell website, for example, and you'll see just a bunch of underpowered boxes. I did a look at a quick configuration utility, and I fully spec'd out a Dell XPS with a 12th gen Intel, and it already costs more than the M1 Ultra Studio, and it doesn't even come close in performance, so why bother? And I tend to believe the specs that Apple is touting, since they would get skewered if they lied, plus the specs of the M1 Max MacBook were as fast as they claimed. So these are part of the biggest reasons I'm ditching the Windows ecosystem. Now, this is how Mac Studio solves it for me, and why I chose it. So the obvious one is performance. So M1 Max is already insane, so having double that working as one unit is spectacular. And I will finally have a Mac workstation with greater performance than a similar Intel system can provide me. And with Parallels VM, I can run Windows if I need to, use something specific to that environment. And I have been using Windows in a VM with the MacBook, and I've been able to do almost everything I need to do with zero lag. So there's no thermal constraints such as with the MacBook, and the MacBook will have thermal constraints. I haven't experienced them yet, but they're bound to happen in the future, especially with a laptop. No such constraints with the Studio, since they will have proper cooling and airflow. and they have very little power consumption compared to a typical desktop. Typical desktop is power hungry, and we already seen how efficient the M1 Max is, so there is no doubt the Studio will be just as power efficient. I'm really stoked with all the ports that they have. I will have access to 4 Thunderbolt 4 ports, a 10 gigabit Ethernet that will allow me to connect to a NAS in the future and work off that for like video work, 2 USBs for backup compatibility, and an okay HDMI port they did with a 2.0 again, plus 2 more Thunderbolt 4 ports in the front, and yes, a UHS 2 SD card slot, which is fantastic. These alone will solve a ton of my wiring issues since I won't have to snake cables around my desk. There'll be a minimal wire setup other than a couple of cables to connect to the monitors, and I'll be able to connect that with just a couple of short pieces of wire. It's got a very small footprint, and for the extreme power this thing delivers, it will support my workflow as I expand in the future. This machine will no doubt last me for years. So the Mac Pro will probably be way over my budget, so there was really no consideration. So when this came out, this was the best option for me at this time. So I will be doing an unboxing when this thing arrives, so subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss it. Check out my Apple playlist over here where I also have reviews of the M1 Max and the dock that I use. So thanks for watching.